Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Well, I know what you're thinking. You all had a good meal, and you thought, what's the session where I can quietly take a small, quick nap, right? I hope I can keep you awake. I'll just take a second here if everyone's seated, and I'll get started. Yeah, I'm going to point you out and ask you questions. All right, folks. I'm glad you guys are here. So what I'm going to try to do is give you guys a short sort of background and see what we have done. Our story or journey is not very different from what you've heard from many people today, starting with Guy and others. But you all know we think each of our organizations are somewhat unique, so we do have some unique challenges. So I want to point out some of the challenges we have had and how we use Bizagi to solve some of those problems and where we're going, and try to leave 10 minutes or so to ask questions, because I think that's where most of the gain's going to be. So feel free to think about questions that I can get some sort of answers from you, and maybe you can ask me some questions. So I did not want the picture, but they put it in there. My name is Bala Sivankoil, and I am the Director of Application Development for AgFirst. Has anyone heard about AgFirst? Okay, some of you have. Quick show of hands, how many of you are actually already customers of Bizagi? So I can just kind of, all right. So many of you are, so that's great. AgFirst is a more than 100-year-old company. It was started in the early 1900s as a response to lenders who were not ready to lend to the farming community because they thought it was too risky. So there was not a very reliable, source of money for the farming community, and President Roosevelt signed this act to create and start the farm credit system. So AgFirst is part of the farm credit system. In 1900, it started out with 12 banks in the country, but right now they all merged over time, and there are 4 banks on the different parts of the United States. AgFirst is one of those 4 banks. We are kind of the bank of banks. Our customers are 20, we call them associations, but each of those 20 entities are independent organizations or smaller community bank. You can kind of think of as community bank. So our job is to provide them with technology and business services to these 20 organizations along the East Coast. So all the way from Ohio downwards to Puerto Rico, Florida. For example, in Florida, we have Farm Credit of Florida that caters to all kinds of ag businesses. We're about, AgFirst has about a $20 billion portfolio for loans. We do both commercial loans as well as consumer loans. We have about $10 billion worth investment portfolio. So that's about $30 billion. And we do primarily, or we do only loans. We don't do deposits or checking account. We're not a traditional commercial bank. But we do compete with the commercial banks, Wells Fargo, the BOA, because some of the largest businesses, ag businesses, do use other banks for a source of money. So that's what we do. So the idea is to provide we feel like we have a good story, a purpose. This morning, guys started, one of the 10 was have a purpose. We feel like we have that. We have a good purpose. Ag business is a kind of fundamental sort of activity for the country, so we try to rally around that. So as a 100-year organization, like you heard from other people, we do have the challenges of inertia. We do certain things certain way. We don't question things as much as we should. So that's obviously one issue. But for example, I manage the application development teams, and I do have a number of teams that are working on other things, so we do have a lot of other challenges, but specifically related to what we are using Bizagi for. Our challenges was that there was a space in the origination process that we didn't have a good solution, right? Anyone in the financial lending space here? A few. So essentially you have loan officers, you have loan assistants, you have analysts, you have closers, appraisers. These guys kind of work together. Sometimes they're in the same location, or they might be distributed, and they work together to approve a loan. So that's the activity. We didn't have a good system. So initially they were using different kinds of solutions, the emails, sticky notes. InfoPath was one. If you know what InfoPath is a solution by Microsoft that's not supported anymore. It kind of forms solution. So our issue was that the legacy way of doing things was inconsistent. There was no transparency. There was insufficient data as things move from one place to another. And all of that I'm sure you all know the issue with such a legacy way of doing things. Another area in the United States, at least in lending, especially if you're doing consumer lending, there's a heavy burden on regulations and in terms of disclosures, documents, what you have to do, how quickly you have to do. For example, if you apply for a loan within 3 days, you have to do certain things. Within a month, you have to do certain other things. So ongoing regulation changes, so, keeping up with that, that's another challenge for us. Efficiency and customizations, like I said, we do have a unique situation where 20 of the organizations that are our customers, how hard can it be? Only 20 customers. But each of those 20 have a slightly different flavor of how they do things. Their roles and responsibilities of a loan officer might be different from another one, right? Their business rules or their portfolio is different. In Florida, that citrus is big. In Georgia, it might be peaches and corn or something different. So a lot of things are different yet the same. And so that's our big challenge. How do we have the same solution? If you have an appraisal solution where you're appraising a property, it's fundamentally the same, but these 20 organizations do it slightly differently. So we do need to customize. We need to bring in efficiency so that they can do more with the same resources. Monitor performance. One time we went to one of our associations 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they said it takes too long to do things. And we said, how long does it take? So we don't know. They were not measuring it. So if you don't measure, and if you have subjective ideas about how things are working, it's unlikely you don't know what to change. So measuring the performance of your process as well as your performance of your activity is important to change. What you can't measure, you can improve, right? And more and more people want to work remotely, especially in our case. We believe in sort of contact. Not a lot of sort of e-commerce is going on. Our loan officers actually take a truck and drive in the rural areas, go to farmers' home or office, and that's where they're doing business on the road. So it was important for us to enable them to do work remotely, especially some of the younger farmers. So they want to work remotely as they're traveling. So both our customers, our associations, as well as our borrowers wanted to work remotely. So that was the other challenge. We didn't have a very consistent way of providing this sort of disconnected remote access to our data and transactions. And of course, we have a number of legacy systems. How do we connect to them? How do we also have an initiative to rationalize and modernize some of these systems. How do we kind of bring all of that together? So all of these things obviously cannot be solved in one shot. So first was it to become aware of these things and see how we can get there. So what our approach was, obviously, we looked at a number of ways to solve this problem. I have about 45 to 50 developers that have been doing from scratch development. We have some offshore connections where they do development. So one option was let's just go code this thing. Let's build a framework and do that, right? And from past experience, my experience is that is a slow process. We can come up with amazingly customized solutions, but it's not quick. So we had, just before we did Bizagi, we had bought a commercial system, fairly expensive, and that was going to take us 2.5 to 3 years to implement. So 1 year into that, we realized that was not going to work because the level of customization we needed required that company to recode some of their stuff. So we kind of stopped that and said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. There was a lot of sunk costs, millions of dollars. And we said, okay, let's switch to something else. And among the other tools we looked at, Bizagi seemed like a good fit just because of the ease of development, the rapid development that we could do. It was also kind of the fit in terms of business rules that you can customize, the deployment, and all of those things that you already know. So it seemed like a good fit. We said, okay, let's do it. Some of the key things that I have kind of tried to share here is that even though our developers were very smart, they can code in many languages, we knew that we didn't know how to use the tool, so we did bring in an expert for several months on site. We just kind of said we're going to spend that money. So that was very useful for us. Have one of their, in fact, I think Ernesto, one of those guys who was there, we had him for 3 months, and that was very helpful in terms of not being able to solve the problem quickly because they know the tool, they know the right way to do it. It's not that we couldn't have figured it out, but it would have taken a little bit more time. So on-site expert was a good thing. The biggest thing for us was the technology was not the biggest issue. And you've heard that a number of times this morning, the cultural change, because what we deployed, and I'll tell you about the solutions, a very complex solution, involves 7 to 8 to 9 kind of actors acting. And most of our customers, out of the 2,500 users, 1,800 would end up using the system we're creating. So imagine if 80% of your organization has to stop doing the way they're doing things and move to a new way of doing things. And the process we automated is the bread and butter, which is entering loan applications and approving them, and that's our bread and butter. So imagine 80% of your folks having to switch. So earlier on we recognized there was going to be a huge people, behavioral changes was the most important thing, and how do we do that? So I put a lot of work into that. I read every possible book on change leadership, change management, and brought in these CEOs of these organizations and their leaders, and talked about 2-day workshop on change management. What do you do? I mean, there's going to be people who are going to not want to change. There are going to be people who maybe are lukewarm about this change, and who are your ambassadors, and how do you manage that? So I cannot emphasize how important that was for us. I mean, that was a huge, huge, huge thing. Because in my mind, most of such things like CRM deployment, I don't know how many of you have a CRM in your organization. I don't know how easy it was for you. That's a huge change. It's less of a technology issue, more of a people issue. Because its transparency is amazing, not for everybody, right? If a loan officer, what work he's doing, who he's dealing with is transparent to everybody, and that could affect his, every day, how he's doing, and then people will start assessing him. So there were lots of people issues that we attacked that by not just top down, but bottom up. We started identifying people who may not come on board, talk to them about their concerns, try to calm them down, try to tell them why this was important. So that was a large effort for us in terms of the cultural change. Now, I can't stand here and say we were 100% successful with every customer. There are still some customers we were going through that change. But by and large, when the senior management bought into it, and when we started these kind of organically getting groups together and trying to make them understand the bigger picture of why we're doing this, how it's going to be beneficial to the organization, how they can enhance their loan portfolio without adding resources, they really bought into that. Well, another thing that obviously you've heard is this, we work Agile, we do scrums and in sprints, and everybody's doing that. But the cool thing in this case was every 2 weeks we were able to show our customers, okay, here's the feedback that you gave us 2 weeks ago, and we implemented what do you think? And they say, oh yeah, I thought that'll be useful, I don't think it's going to be useful. So there was a lot of interaction every 2 weeks, and we were able to push out the solution, a working solution. Within 2 weeks we had working solution, and then iteratively we modified that. So that was really a groundbreaking thing for us. In the past, we would go have workshops about requirements and go into our caves and come back after 6 months or 9 months and say, hey, here it is, and they're like, no, that's not what I wanted. So we avoided that, so it worked out really well. Any questions? We have so far automated maybe 15 or 16 different processes. And then of course, like I said, 20 of our organization are kind of unique, so we have even tweaked some of those. So you might say 15 multiplied by 10 or so. We have probably 70, 80 solutions that are kind of slightly modified version of the base solution. And we have come up with a way to create base solutions and then modify and then push them out. We're kind of doing some unique things there. For example, one of our solution appraisal process automation. We have a base solution. We start from there, but then we quickly customize that, and then we're able to make changes and push out customized versions automatically. The loan approval process, that's the most complicated one we have done. Maybe 300-400 pieces of data, 6-7 different roles. It's connecting to multiple systems. So the most complex process. Appraisal is somewhat easier. We have done onboarding. We have done special asset management. We've done a number of things that are working really well. But our most complex one we've done is the loan approval process. Like I said, over 1,800 people use that. Our volumes are not very high. I heard someone say millions of transactions. We're not millions of transactions, but the dollar values are pretty high. So, any questions? I'll talk a little bit about integration. We have done integration with a number of our backend systems. Our system, for example, is integrated with CRM. So we can take an opportunity, for example, in a CRM and convert that to a loan application without having to re-enter data. We're not using RPA or anything. We are using traditional web services. So if you have an idea that some guy over here wants $1 million loan, we have a little bit of understanding what kind of structure. We can pipe that into Bizagi and start a loan application. We have integrated with our data warehouse system. We've integrated with our mainframe loan system, loan processing system. We have integrated with our FICO, which is your Fair Isaac credit report. We get the scores from there. So imagine in terms of transformation-wise, this is our users had to go to 6-7 different systems to run this loan. And they had to go to different systems, but also communicate with different people on what they found. Now it's all in one place. The 7 or 8 actors go to one place, and the system pulls copies data for them. For example, if you're searching for a customer, you just type your last name, pulls all the relevant data about that customer from the data warehouse. What are their past transactions? What's their collateral? What's their payment, and all of that stuff. So that has been the most amazing part, having for them not to go out of the solution and take them end to end. And analytics-wise, there is out-of-the-box analytics. I don't know how many of you use the reports, but we kind of supplemented that with, we use what's called Tableau on top. It's a visualization tool. You can do KPIs and dashboards. We also use other reporting mechanisms. SSRS is a Microsoft reporting, so we use reports on top. So, for example, we do that to customize. For example, some associations might want the work queue to be automatically distributed. So as loans come in, you send it to the right, you kind of round robin. If you have 5 people who are dealing with it, just kind of round robin it. Some people want more customization. They want a manager to look at the load and then decide where the work is going to go. Or some might want some more intelligence built into it. For example, if you have a complex loan structure, then you want to send it to a more senior analyst versus a junior analyst. So we have built in some level of intelligence into this work routing, where it looks at the complexity of the loan and then routes it to the right group. Combined with the analytics that comes out of the box and using Tableau and SSRS reporting, we have substantially kind of enhanced the experience there. This is a common theme. You've heard about this. Within the organization, now there's transparency in terms of what is our process. Before we started this, when you had a workshop with them, try to understand how they do things, and usually you get an answer, hey, yeah, we do this, and the other person say, no, we don't do that, or at least I don't do that. So now you begin to see that within the organization, different divisions or different regions are doing the same thing in different ways. So after implementing this, there's one process, and it's transparent what that process is. There's one set of business rules for the organization, and everybody knows what that is. And if you want to change, they have a process to change it, and it's documented. So transparency obviously was an important, it's something that you don't do without a tool, right? If you tell your organization, let's just make it all consistent, it doesn't happen so easily. So I kind of talked about this, but our initial process was the loan approval process. Within about 16 weeks, we had the basic solution. I can't say we deployed it after 16 weeks. It took us a little bit more of fine-tuning the process, but 16 weeks, we had our solution pretty much ready. One of the statistics I can give you is one of our associations last year said they did 40% more loans, and they're a $1.2 billion organization. And they attribute it to this level of automation and consistency we have. And they're already improving the process. In terms of metrics they get, they look at the process that's being used. As you can, the process metrics gives you which part of your process is being used more often than the other process. They cut out some of the sort of the wasteful process they had, made improvements on their process timing. And overall, they were able to improve their throughput without adding people. Another interesting story is our customers are able to support auditing much better. Before, they kept manual logs of who asked for a change, who changed it. Now when the auditors come, they just pull out the records from Bizagi and say, okay, here's what happened. Here's who asked for the change. This is what we changed to. And it's a lot more cleaner. And that's a big benefit, Joe. I mean, you don't know how much stress people go through when the audit comes to your door. So that was very useful. How am I doing on time here? Okay. Remote, I talked about the mobile part. The executives who are to sometimes they have to approve things, and they're on the go. They're traveling, and they're able to use the mobile app to approve some of these loans easily. So, some of the lessons learned, I would definitely choose a simpler process with some value. We probably chose a complex process. If I were to do it again, I would take a simpler process and not do the more complex one. We got some help. I think that was good to get some help in the beginning. Again, the change part in my mind is a big deal. If you think that there's going to be resistance, then make sure you kind of put some attention on the change aspect. So that's kind of, with the future. So we are beyond this business process automation. This year we're looking at sort of the customer journey. We're doing a customer journey mapping end to end to see what are the different interactions with us and how we're supporting those activities. And out of that will come a lot of changes for next year. So we're kind of both looking forward and nervous about what will come next year. So we'll see what happens. So that's our big effort this year. We do want to take some more additional smaller processes we have. We want to automate that. And the customer journey and the customer experience is probably going to drive everything for us next year. So I did pretty good. We got 6 more minutes. Any questions?
When did you start?
We were probably one of the earliest Bizagi customers in the US, about 4 years ago, I want to say, 3.5 to 4 years ago.
And what's the most important lessons learned in terms of best practice for your team?
Okay, the question is what are the lessons learned in terms of best practices? I would say we do have a kind of center of excellence. There are 3 people who are continuously monitoring how we're doing things in terms of standards we have created, in terms of being consistency in how we solve certain problems the same way. Even the UI, we have some guidelines and standards. So we're definitely kind of having these 3 or 4 people review all the work we're doing. At the same time, we don't want to limit the number of people who work on Bizagi, but we have a process to sort of bring it all together. That's one big one. That's a good question. The Bizagi and similar tools, low-code tools, are challenging the traditional definition of people's roles. So on my team, I have people who are, you can call them anything. They are pretty good with process definitions, but they can go change a business rule. So I try to push back when people ask me in my organization, hey, is he a business person or is he a technical person? I'm like, hey, he's creating a solution. What do you want? So. And that's the difference. But you do want technical people as far as interfaces go, where there's much more coding involved. But most of the other stuff is low code or no code.
Hello. Thank you very much. That was really good. Are you using Bizagi on the cloud or are you using it on premises?
We're not using it on the cloud yet because right now the way we are churning sort of solutions very quickly, and oftentimes we're unsure whether the older version will support it or not. We do have 2 versions running right now in production. So I'm not sure how exactly the cloud version is going to work. If it automatically upgrades and my solution doesn't work, I don't know what will happen. So I have not really gone into that yet. I'm sure there's a way to handle that, but right now it's on-prem. Yes, ma'am?
Why do you have 2 versions running in production right now?
Why? So some of the solutions we created 4 years ago, we don't have time to go back and upgrade them. You know, there are things that you need to change and tweak in order for that to work in 11.0. So it's just because we haven't been able to go back and make sure that it's working and move it up.
Do you anticipate bringing them together to one?
Absolutely, it's in our best interest to do that because I know at some point Bizagi will stop supporting those older versions. But yeah, we have already converted many of them, but some of the residual stuff is still in 10.5 or something like that.
This is Vic with Dynamo. Good afternoon, everybody. So, question about your development staff, all right? So, one of the big things that we're pushing with our customers or potential customers is the fact that we can train up the non-technical folks to basically have some development flair. So, in your organization, you reference about 45, 50 Agile developers that work maybe in your division. How many of those folks versus the business folks have actually moved forward and are actually developing now either components on the platform and or are pushing Bizagi forward through the organization?
For one of these projects, I have about 20 people in 3 different teams. And we have probably 6 or 7 business folks, but mostly they're focused in understanding the requirements and translating it to a process. So they're able to go do the process and then we turn it over to developers. But they're all on the same team, but in terms of are there any business people actually creating the solution, I'll say that they go to the level of creating the business process and that's it. So, any other questions? Was I able to keep you awake? Awesome. Hey, 2 of my team members are here, Kevin Backus and Adrian Patterson. If you guys have any questions, please ask us. And love to talk to folks who have done, I know you guys have done a lot of work. Our next, one thing very interesting, I see the RPA thing, and we might have good uses for that kind of solution. So thank you very much, appreciate it.